All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's program informational for Collective Leadership Advancing Racial Equity, a new initiative of the Collective Impact Forum. My name is Courtney W. Robertson, and I serve as the Director of Programs and Partnerships and your program lead for CLARE. I would also like to quickly introduce my colleagues, Jennifer Splansky-Juster, who is the Executive Director of the Collective Impact Forum, and our colleague, Tracy Timmons-Gray, who is the Associate Director of Community and Programs. So they both will be supporting with today's session. So if you have any questions, any technical challenges, you can feel free to reach out to them directly in the chat. So before we continue with our time together, we want to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous lands that we are all joining from. Now, although we are gathering virtually, we still believe that it is important to acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from Indigenous territory. And we honor and respect the diverse Indigenous peoples connected to this land and honor their past, present, and future. We would like to acknowledge that this session is presented and recorded on the traditional land of the Muskogee, the Ohlone, Coast Salish, Snoqualmie, Suquamish, and Duwamish people past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and these tribes. We also invite you all to participate in the land acknowledgement. So if you are already familiar with which land you are joining from, feel free to put that in the chat and also include the city that that land is connected to. And if you are in the US and Canada and not sure which land, Tracy will put a link in the chat that you can use to identify which land you are joining from. So we'll take a few seconds for folks to put those in the chat, and thank you in advance. Okay. Shout out to Mississippi, Choctaw. I know Starksville very well. Starkville very well. All right. So we'll keep those flowing in. Thank you all so much for contributing that to the chat. And again, if you could put the city that that Indigenous land is connected to as well. Now, this is new information for you. We invite you to make note of what you learned about the Indigenous land you are on. This is a great first step to understand more about the Indigenous communities that are part of your area, both historically and currently. We also want to recognize that acknowledging Indigenous lands and communities is just the first step in strengthening relationships, knowledge, and accountability to better support our Indigenous community members. Relationship building and understanding community context are key factors for successful collaboratives. So as you build your own deep knowledge of the many layers within the community or communities that your collective impact effort supports, taking action to learn, build connections, and strengthen relationships with your Indigenous community members, including Native-led organizations and governance bodies, can be very helpful. When thinking about what next steps to take, the Native Governance Center, a Native-led nonprofit organization that supports leadership development and tribal governance support programs, has wonderful resources on taking next steps beyond land acknowledgement and strengthening relationships within your own community. We will include the link to their work in the chat, and you can also find them at nativegov.org. All right, so this is what our time will look like together. We have less than an hour together, so we will spend a little time talking about both the Collective Impact Forum, in case you aren't familiar with our organization, and then talk a bit more about the CLARE program. I will preface that a lot of this, for those who may have already read the call for applications and other materials about the program, some of this will be a repeat, but we've also taken into account many of the questions that you all have submitted in advance of today's session, so that we can answer those questions as we go along. Then we'll talk about some of the next steps and key dates. And then my goal is to reserve at least 20 to 30 minutes for you all to ask any questions. And if you feel like you've gotten your questions answered, you don't have to stick around. And if we go a little bit past the time, I'm happy to stick around for folks who might need more time to ask additional questions. Before we continue on, though, I would like to know how folks are showing up today. So if you could, in the chat, just put one word, or, if you want to do a hyphenated word and cheat and do two, just let us know how you're showing up today. How are you showing up to this space today? One or two words. Curious. I love it with an exclamation point. 11. Then we got curious, ready, well, optimistic, joyful, busy, but energized. I feel that. Present, tired, busy. Absolutely. Energy, yes. Beyonce always gives me energy. So awesome. Thank you all so much. So hopefully you leave here the same or better than you left, and not worse is our goal. So thank you all so much for putting that in the chat. So again, we're going to spend a little time just talking about the collective impact forum, talking about the program, and then again, want to open it up to questions for you all. So the collective impact forum is essentially a resource to the field of folks who are engaged in place-based, equity-focused collaborative work. Say that 3 times in a row. And our mission is to inspire and support people to use collective impact approaches to bolster community-driven solutions that achieve equitable outcomes for individuals and communities. And so we do that in a number of ways. One, by hosting events. So many of you may have attended our annual summit that happens every April, end of April going into early May. We host workshops regularly, webinars, etc. So that's one of the ways in which we try to support folks to leverage this particular approach to collaboration. We also curate tools, articles, blogs, and host a podcast. So shout out to Tracy, who's our producer for the podcast. We facilitate communities of practice, so very similar to the program that you all are here to learn about today, facilitating opportunities like that for folks to come together and learn from one another. We also offer light touch coaching and technical assistance, and then do our best to elevate cutting edge ideas, again, through many of the platforms that have already been uplifted. And then who we support, our core audience, if you will, are backbone leaders. So many of these folks are either situated on a backbone team or within a backbone organization and leading or facilitating a local collaborative. And then in addition to that, we do have funders, community members, consultants, technical assistance providers, et cetera, who also engage in our programming. But again, the core audience are those folks who are facilitating and leading collaborative work locally. We are issue agnostic as an entity. However, some of the more common issue areas, if you will, that folks tend to represent who engage in our programming are around health, education and youth, economic opportunity, and community development. So that's where we see the bulk of folks focusing their energy, but again, see folks who are across pretty much any issue area that you can identify. And then in terms of geography, the majority of our audience is US based and across all of those typographies, so rural, urban, tribal, et cetera. We have a good percentage of folks who represent Canada, and then folks who the rest of that percentage will represent folks from all around the world, from the rest of the world, rather. And then this is our beautiful team. We look so beautiful on here. So at the top, we have our core team. So again, I've already introduced Jen and Tracy. Cindy, unfortunately, couldn't be with us today, but she will serve as a co-program lead, if you will, for the CLARE program as well, and is excited to connect with you all too. And then at the bottom, we have our advisors. So these are the folks who we meet with to keep our ground, our hearts, our minds, and our knowledge from the ground so that we can know what's going on in collaborative work, since we all aren't actively working in local collaboratives. And then they also advise us around our programming and also support with the delivery of programming as well. So those faces may look familiar to many of you all, but this is our team. And so I'm going to take a quick pause here before we jump into what CLARE is, and really want to talk first about why CLARE. So I have been with the Collective Impact Forum team now it's coming up 2 years in a couple of weeks. And prior to my time with the team, I spent 7 years working on a backbone team supporting collaborative work in Memphis. So everything from prenatal care, early childhood, through college degree attainment and opportunity youth. I've supported collaborative work groups across that full spectrum of cradle to career. And one of the things that and in addition to that, I spent 3 years prior to that as a partner in the partnership. So 10 years engaged in this local collaborative. And one of the things that I really yearned for in the work, one, I started this work when Collective impact was still a fairly new term, sort of the collaborative workspace and how folks were working collaboratively, excuse me, was changing. So there weren't a lot of folks who was doing the type of work that I did. And so I didn't have a lot of peers who were familiar with the type of work we were doing. And so one of the things I really wish I had was like this network, right, of folks, right, of folks who both understood the work, understood the challenges in the work, who I could troubleshoot ideas with, right? Was one of the things. But another thing that I really, really, in retrospect, wish that I had was more time for rest and that I prioritize that and really thinking about self-care and not just how that shows up for me, but also how that shows up in the context of how I was supporting and leading those collaborative workspaces. And so when I joined the team, early on, we had conversations about just like programming and sort of the needs that we knew existed across the place-based field through the audience, through the CIF audience. And so I was like, I want to create a program that me 3 or 4 years ago would have wanted to be a part of. And so I hope that we've gotten a lot of response since we've launched the program of folks who've been saying, this is, a great opportunity. I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Thank you all for doing this. So we've gotten some early responses that we're hopefully on track and aligned to what folks are needing. But because of all of the work we've poured into it, Jen, Tracy, Cindy, myself, and our advisors over the past a little over a year now, we've been developing this idea, cultivating it. I'm really hoping that it resonates with folks, right? And that you all feel what it is I hope to bring to this space. So I just want to give you all a little background around why are we even doing this, right? Because we could easily just put a program out there, but this was really birthed out of me personally knowing how burnt out folks are in this type of work, and then also hearing from other practitioners, from our advisors, et cetera, that they're hearing the same things as they're working with communities across the country. And so with that, we'll talk more about the program itself. All right. So at its core, CLARE is, and if you see me looking over, I've made notes so that I can make sure I hit on all the points that have been raised. But at its core, CLARE is an opportunity for leaders who are, again, leading and facilitating collaborative groups to take a step back and examine their leadership in a few different ways, right? So one, examining their leadership in the context of the mental models, the patterns, and beliefs that they hold that contribute to their leadership. Thinking about it in the context of how they can think about self-care, wellness, the impact of trauma, right? And how they use that specifically around somatic practices and other self-care practices to address stress and burnout, right? Or to mitigate it as much as possible. And in addition to that, how can they think about incorporating those types of things into the collaborative fabric, right? Into how they lead and facilitate and support those local collaboratives. And then this next piece is around building community with others who are leading collaborative work. I think I can confidently say probably after every workshop that we hold, people are often asking, do you all have a community of practice or a space where we can come together with other folks who are sort of dealing with and trying to navigate this work as well? And as much as possible, we try to have spaces, right? But we know that there's always a need for more. So we're hoping that this also serves as that type of space, right? Where you can come together, you can connect with peers, and not just within this 10 months, right? But that these become long-standing and lasting relationships that meaningfully contribute to everybody's work. And so that to me is the core of what CLARE represents. And this is all in service to advancing racial equity and changing systems locally, right? So that piece is not forgotten. A lot of CLARE focuses on the individual, but our goal is to also take that reflection, those individual reflections around your own leadership, and then think about how does that show up and how does that contribute to your collaborative space, and then how does that ultimately contribute to the largest systems that you all are working to shift and change. So it is a 10-month accelerator. It's a 10-month leadership accelerator. It will be capped at 20 individuals is our goal. And this will mostly be virtual with right now one confirmed 2-day in-person convening that will be held at Haley Farm. So it's Alex Haley's family farm in Clinton, Tennessee is where that February retreat, if you will be held. And we are hoping to add a final retreat / in-person convening towards the end of that experience as well. But right now, one confirmed in-person convening that'll be held in Clinton, Tennessee, and then the rest of the engagements will happen virtually. So a few other things I would like to note is one, that there is an emphasis on BIPOC leaders, specifically BIPOC leaders who are leading health or health issue specific collaboratives in the U.S. South. But this is open to anyone who is leading place-based work, right, locally. And the reasoning behind the focus on BIPOC leaders is, one, giving BIPOC leaders unique experience and orientation to the issues being addressed that most often negatively impact BIPOC communities, right? And so we understand one of the things that I've shared with my team, I was actually doing work in the city that I grew up in. And so for me, I'm seeing some of the same people I grew up with, right, who are now showing up for services and support. I have family there. And so it was very personal for me doing this work, which also led to it being very draining, right, because I was so deeply connected. And I think whether you're in the city, you're working in the city you were born and raised in or not, there's just a very unique experience that BIPOC folks have around a lot of these issues and connection. The other piece is around research. So we did a lot of research to see, one, is there even a need? Are we filling a gap? Are we adding to the noise, et cetera? And what we found, one, is that a lot of BIPOC leaders and BIPOC-led organizations and initiatives tend to have less access to development opportunities that are culturally relevant. And they also tend to have less discretionary dollars to engage in things like professional development. So we also wanted to sort of address that particular gap as well. And then there's not a lot of programming that's specific, again, to folks who are doing the place-based work. There are often programs that are more generally around leadership or that focus on an aspect of that work, but not collaborative place-based work in general. And then the other piece, as we think about the opening to all, right, is that we also understand and acknowledge and recognize that there are non-persons of colors who are allies in this work and who are also doing work in BIPOC communities and in service to BIPOC communities. And so we understand both the value that they can both offer and what they can gain by engaging in this type of opportunity. So I wanted to give a little context around why the focus on BIPOC leaders, why the focus on the South, et cetera. And what you see on the screen are the objectives that we are holding for this. And these are the personal objectives or the individual objectives. So again, that focus on healing and wellness, this focus on deepening sort of your analysis of how your social identities and experiences impact your collaborative leadership. And then again, this piece around building social networks and collective power through that group of folks who will be coming together in this first cohort. So these are some of the benefits of engaging in this program. So again, we're really going to be doing deep exploration around leadership in the context of leading a collaborative, which again, I think is one of the unique components of this particular program. Again, it's not just leadership in general. It's about your leadership in the context of leading a collaborative, which can be very messy and very tough and very challenging, right? Access to tools and resources to support your work, right? Not just the work, but also your self-care and wellness practices. Again, you have those opportunities for in-person, hopefully 2 convenings, but right now 1. You have the 6 hours of coaching with a certified leadership coach, which I'm really excited about that component as well. That was something I've never had access to, and so really excited for folks to take advantage of that. The in-person session time with subject matter experts. We are working and building out this curriculum with some really incredible folks who have deep expertise in a lot of areas. So really excited for that component of it. And again, that connection with other folks from across the U.S. who are also engaging in this work. You'll receive complimentary registration to our virtual Collective Impact Action Summit. And so for those of you who've attended before, hopefully that excites you. And if you haven't attended, hopefully that excites you as well. You'll receive a certificate of completion from our organization. And then this also comes with a $1,500 stipend that will be paid directly to the individual. So this will not go to your organization. It will go to you specifically. So I'm trying to make sure I got all my notes together. All right. And these are the expectations we're holding for the program. So one, that you attend the virtual program orientation, which will be held in January, that you attend the in-person convening or convenings, that you attend the virtual convenings, and that you participate in the 6 individual coaching sessions. And then this final piece is around travel. So one of the questions we've gotten repeatedly is, what is the cost to participate? So technically there is no cost. However, participants will be responsible for the cost of travel. And how we're defining that is your flight and your ground transportation, all right, to wherever that in-person convening is. And our hope is that the $1,500 stipend will help to offset that cost for you, so that you're not absorbing that cost yourself. But again, you will cover the cost of travel, which will include flight and ground transportation, and then any meals that you purchase outside of the meals that'll be provided. So just to paint a picture for you, for the 2-day in-person convening, the first day will just be arrival. We'll have a welcome dinner. On the second day, folks will have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then on that final day, which will be a half day, we'll provide breakfast and lunch and then snacks throughout all of those days. So again, you'd be responsible for flight, ground transportation, and then any meals that you would purchase outside of the meals that are provided. I will also note that for the Haley Farms in-person convening, ground transportation from that airport, round trip from the airport to Haley Farm and back will be provided, given the remoteness of that particular location and distance from the airport. So we will provide ground transportation for that particular in-person convening. The last thing I'll note on this slide is that the coaching sessions, the cadence, when you meet, etc., that will be decided between the participant and the coach. So myself, Jen, Cindy, we won't have any say in when you're meeting or anything. Ideally, you meet with the coach in the off months when you're not having a session with the full cohort. But again, that will be totally up to the individual and the coach to decide on that meeting schedule. So this is a layout of the program schedule. Again, going from January through October of next year, we have the program orientation, which will be virtual in January. The kickoff convening, again, will be held at Haley Farm in Clinton, Tennessee, February 24th through 26th. All of the virtual sessions will be held from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So you can count on that being the time frame, and these are the dates. And then zoning in on the September date, again, we are working to host that as an in-person session, 2-day in-person convening. If not, that will be a session that will be held on one of those days. And participants will be notified by June 30th of 2025 which direction we're going with that, so that you have enough time to plan if it's in person. And so again, this is the program schedule. All times are in Eastern Time. And again, outside of that program orientation and in-person convening, all sessions are 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. All right. So as we think about some of the considerations we'll use to select participants, again, these things have been outlined in the call for applications, so you can reference it there, and then we'll also make sure that it's in the deck. But region, so again, there is an emphasis on the U.S. South, and we've defined what those states are. But this, again, is open to anyone in the U.S., again, who's doing place-based work. So if you are outside of the U.S. South, please, 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 we encourage you to still apply. Our goal is to have as much of a mix as possible. And so we're not shooting for 100% U.S. South health focus, right? But that is going to be a strong emphasis and priority for the program. Again, the issue and population focus. So again, there is an emphasis on health focused collaboratives or issue specific health issue specific collaboratives. But again, any collaborative working across any number of issues is welcome to apply. And then in terms of population, how we are defining place-based is anything up to the county level. So if you're working at the neighborhood level, if you're working at the city level or the county level, that is what we would consider place-based for the purposes of this program. So again, you could be working on reproductive justice at a county level in your state, and that will be appropriate. Your collaborative maturity, right? So we did get a couple of questions about folks who were saying our collaborative is new, we're still sort of, getting established. Is this for us? Um, we are looking for collaborators who have at minimum started implementation of their work. So you might be in the first year of implementation, and that's totally fine, but you have started to do some work within the collaborative space, is what we'd be looking for. The backbone role. So individuals must be employed by and full-time employed by a backbone team or organization, right? So this would be the organization that is sort of project managing, helping to steward or shepherd the particular collaborative, who's providing support, whether that's, through facilitation, through data support, through securing funding opportunities, et cetera. You're sort of playing the quarterback, if you will, for collaborative. So that is the type of organization and role. And so you should be an individual who's facilitating the collaborative or leading the collaborative to some degree. So for example, you might be an executive director of a backbone organization, right? And you might not necessarily be facilitating every single time, but you have some hand in facilitating that collaborative work and supporting that work. Those would be the types of roles that we are looking for. We're not naming specific roles because we know they can vary both based on size, based on the types of roles that are at organizations. But again, you have a role in facilitating and supporting the collaborative work. Time in role. So we are looking for folks, you must have been in your role for 1 year at minimum by the time the program starts in January. So if you're at month 10 right now and you'll hit 12 months in January, you can apply for this program. All right. So again, at least a year in your role facilitating and supporting the collaborative. The next is around your commitment to equity. So we have questions. I think there are 3 or 4 personal statement questions in the application. And so we'll be weighing those questions, right? What you're responding to in terms of your commitment to equity, and not just your commitment, right? But also your collaborative's commitment to equity as well. So that should be evident either through what you write about your collaborative or what's posted on the website for your collaborative in the organization. And then we'll also consider other demographic factors, so things such as the type of area, right? So if it's rural versus tribal versus urban, we're looking for balances there. Individuals who have a disability, right? Sexual orientation, et cetera. Our goal is to make this cohort as well-rounded and as balanced as possible. So those are other factors that we'll look at as well as we go through applications. And then the last piece is around your organizational commitment, and this comes through your manager letter of support. So there is a link to a letter that you will send to your manager, whoever that manager is, for them to sign, basically stating that they are aware that you're applying to this program, and if selected, these are the expectations and requirements for you, right? And so they're essentially giving your blessing in advance to participate in this. There's one thing I wanted to mention about that, and it has slipped my mind. Hopefully it'll come back to me. But yeah, so having that manager letter, and that letter must be received by November 12th in order for your application to be considered complete. So again, make sure that you're staying on your manager. I will do my best to send a courtesy email at least a week in advance if folks are missing that and have submitted the application portion. But again, you want to make sure that your manager has submitted that particular letter of commitment to the program. All right. And so before we go into question and answers, and I'm also looking over to make sure I've covered all of my talking points because I have quite a few. Just want to name some of the next steps. So by next Friday, or Thursday rather, you all will receive a copy of this presentation deck. And again, it'll include the additional FAQs and the webinar recording. It'll also be available on the CI Forum website through the blog. Again, applications, including your manager letter of support, are due by November 12th, 11:59 p.m. So we had to take it back to our college days. Please don't be the 11:30 person like I was. Try to get that in well before that, but you have until essentially midnight on the 13th to get that in, so November 12th. And then everyone will be notified of your acceptance status by December 16th at the latest is our commitment. I anticipate that we will have a lot of applications to go through. So if it's looking like we may not make that December 16th date, we will definitely communicate that well in advance. But our goal is to make sure that folks know by December 16th so that you can plan accordingly because things will start rolling once the new year kicks in. And so with that, I know I have shared a ton. I may have missed a couple of things, but would like to now pause to take any questions. And Jen, if we have questions in the chat, happy to take those first.
Thanks, Courtney. We do, so I am happy to help with those for you. A couple of folks are wondering, Courtney, if the opportunity is limited to one person per organization.
That is an excellent question. So, and that's actually something we hadn't discussed. So that's a great question. I will encourage anyone who is interested to apply. And if it shakes up, I know that you all work with dynamic folks, so you may have 3 really incredible folks. Our goal is to have this be as well-rounded and as balanced as possible. So we definitely don't want 3 or 4 people from the same organization, right? Because that would be very heavy. But would definitely encourage if you have multiple folks from your organization who are interested in applying, excuse me, to do so. But I don't have a specific answer for that because I actually hadn't thought about multiple folks applying from one organization.
Okay, thank you. For time and role, would time in similar roles in a different organization be sufficient?
So it would need to be with your current collaborative / organization, unfortunately. So with the particular one that you're with.
And can you speak a little bit to the why of that, Courtney?
Yeah. So one, if you're earlier, and this again comes from experience as well, in your collaborative work, in supporting collaborative work, folks might say if you've seen one collaborative, you've seen them all, right? I don't necessarily think that. I think there are nuances and things you need to learn and know in order to like really lean into your role. So would definitely want you to be at that organization and in that role for at least a year. Now there are instances where folks are, so I'll use myself as an example. During my last organization, I ended up being in 3 different roles, right? But they were all in service to the collaborative. So you may have folks in that particular boat, right, who may have been with the organization for 2 years, but you're in this particular role for a year.
What if the collective that folks are facilitating is a statewide coalition? So like the state of Mississippi, for example.
Yeah. So again, we're looking up to the county level. I know that statewide and national, right, collaboratives do exist, but our goal is to be as close to the ground as possible, which is why we've capped it at the county level, just for geographic purposes. But yeah, if it's a statewide, unless you're doing specific work in a specific city, then no, unfortunately.
Courtney. So I'll just ask these for being thorough. You've sort of spoken to this, but someone leads a national effort that brings together 6 state teams. So they're the backbone supporting child welfare systems towards family strengthening. Is this too far out of the place-based expectation? I think that's similar to the question you just answered, but just want to take all the questions to be thorough. Okay, thank you. And then let's see. Do you have a sense of the amount of additional time outside of convenings and retreat that participants would have background reading, assignments to work on, etc.? Just want to have a broader understanding of the deliverables beyond participation.
Yeah. So much of the pre-work, and again, one of the things I didn't touch on as much was around curriculum. So we are still building that out. Again, we're working with folks with deep expertise around equity and systems change, around thinking about your like trauma-informed leadership, equity-informed leadership, etc. My goal is to minimize the amount of work that's happening in between, right? So we're not looking to give you 2 and 3 and 4 hours of pre-work, right? But there will be work, right, to sort of prepare you for those sessions, right? So that might look like reading an article, right? Or reflecting on a set of questions or thinking about your collaborative ecosystem, right? So I wouldn't imagine, and please don't hold me to this, but I don't imagine that any pre-work that happens outside of those session spaces should take you more than an hour to complete. And again, we're still building that out. And a part of us still building that out is that we are also looking to, so the 20 individuals who will be selected, their responses will also inform the direction of the curriculum as well. So if we're seeing that a lot of folks really are having challenges around this particular thing, we might go deeper around there, or it might be something that we need to add to the overall arc. So we're also holding off until we've selected those participants to finalize what that arc of learning and curriculum looks like. But yeah, I don't imagine more than an hour of work in between sessions. And then again, our hope is that what you're taking out of those sessions, what you're learning, the tools, the practices, et cetera, you're also working those into your work, right? So there will be explicit time in sessions for folks to reflect on like how am I going to incorporate this into my work and into my practice outside of this space in the next 30 days, if you will.
Awesome. Courtney, would a multi-county level collaborative meet the place-based requirement?
Multi-county level, I think we could get away with that, particularly if there's like proximity. So I know, for example, I live in Atlanta, so I literally just going to the barbershop 15 minutes down the road, I drive through 3 different counties. So I think that would meet the threshold.
Trying to get proximate to the communities that folks are working with is, I think, what we're hearing as the theme. Courtney, someone joined a little bit late, and I think it would be great for you to speak to some of those. Did you say that the issue focus is health, or how are you thinking of the issue focus piece?
Say that one more time for me, Jen. So sorry.
Sorry. How are you thinking about issue focus? Is it specifically health?
So health is a priority, and more specifically, as examples, right? Like you may have a collaborative that's focused on reproductive justice, right? As an example of what a health collaborative might be focused on. Again, there's an emphasis on health collaboratives, but open to collaboratives working on all issues, right? So whether that's youth and education, if that's housing, economic development, et cetera, all are open to apply.
Brittany asked, do you anticipate offering the program annually?
That is our hope. So this is the first time that we are doing it. So this would be the inaugural cohort, if you will. My goal is to offer this in perpetuity. So we are hoping for a second cohort. And we're not sure. And that's one of the things I didn't mention as well. There were some questions around sort of what happens after the 10 months. And that's something that we started having some conversations around, but haven't fully explored as we were trying to get this piece of it launched. But we're hoping to work with, not necessarily, we'll work with and get feedback from the participants in this cohort around what that might look like, right? So how do they want to remain connected? What are ways that we can help facilitate that? And then what are some ways that folks can do that independently? But my hope is that we can build, that this becomes a thing, right? Where this is a program the field knows about, we do it annually, and then there's this strong sort of network of alumni who are also engaged in some ways. One of the ways I've thought about continuing to connect folks is having some of those folks from the first, from a previous cohort join a session or come speak at a session for, a new cohort as one of those ways that we're thinking about keeping those connections. And then we're always offering programming again, so that's another way that folks can remain both connected to our work, but also to each other.
Those are all the questions that are coming in the Q&A box and that we caught in the chat, but I want to give another moment if folks have other questions as well. There are a couple additional questions that have come in the Q&A box. So someone wants to ask again if applicants need to specifically work in the health space, or is a collaborative focused on opportunity youth, which touches health, relevant also?
Absolutely. So you don't have to work in the health space. That's a priority we're holding, and I'll name. So our primary funder for the program is Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. who has a focus on health. And so that's where a part of where the emphasis on health comes from. It also tracks with who a good majority of our audience is as well. But definitely encouraging folks across all types of collaborative work issues to apply. So you don't have to just be focused on a health related issue. And we know all of these issues intersect and find themselves at the same table anyway.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And then someone also asks, is this only for organizations serving the South? This person is joining from Southern California, a different South. I assume we should not apply this round.
No, so please still apply. Again, there's an emphasis on the U.S. South and health specific collaboratives, but it's open to all folks doing collaborative work across the country. So please, I do encourage you to still apply.
There will likely be an over-representation, I guess I would say, of those two dimensions, but not 100%.
Yeah. All right, well, we will not hold you all up. So again, if you have other questions come to mind, if you have questions as you start the application, please feel free to reach out and give me 24 to 48 hours to respond, if you will. Just so we have been getting quite a few questions around this particular program, but please feel free to reach out and I will get a response to you. And if I don't have a response, I will let you know that and try to figure it out. But want to thank you all so much for your interest in the program, for your support of the programming that we do, and look forward to receiving your applications.